Tuesday night, especially to our young people. At least we are not buried under 5 feet of snow. So why would Calumet College of St. Joseph be helping to host the One Earth Film Festival? Social justice is at the heart of who we are, always has been. And care for the creation, for God's beautiful world, is an essential part of social justice. And here at CCSJ, we have lived out that teaching over the years in very humble, but also rather daring ways. I'll share just a few of those. In 2010, some of my religious studies students, with the permission of our VP of Facilities, God bless them, started our first native plant garden on the east side of the building, facing the refinery. That garden grew over the years, and then a few years later, our science students, so religion and science, see, our science students started a much bigger, much better native plant garden. And now those gardens teem with life. In the spring, they were teeming with honeybees. In the summer, with monarch butterflies. In the fall, the finches came to pick at the little coneflower seeds. So we welcome a variety of life forms here at the college. In 2013, I think it was, I'm going to call out Michael Bowes here. Some of my freshmen took it into their heads to partner with the Wolf Lake Initiative to protest some toxic pollution. So we were out in the streets waving posters and handing out flyers and talking to whomever would listen. Michael Bowes, the director of the Wolf Lake Initiative, can tell you more about the repercussions from that adventure. I won't go into it. More recently, for the past 2.5 years, we've partnered with Faith CDC, a really remarkable interfaith organization in Gary, which is revitalizing the Emerson neighborhood through, among other things, urban farming. So they have welcomed our students to come to the farm, get their hands dirty, work and learn. Really an extraordinary opportunity. So here at CCSJ, we're committed to the environment. We're used to thinking and acting outside of the box. And now we have a new college president, Dr. McCormick, who is passionate about the environment. So my hope for this evening is that out of tonight's conversations will emerge perhaps new ideas, new partnerships, for how CCSJ can continue to be a catalyst for environmental justice and sustainability in Northwest Indiana. So once again, thank you for being here. Please enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Also, thank you so much, Dr. McCormick and Linda and team and everybody here at CCSJ. I'm Anna Garcia Doyle. I'm the director of One Earth Film Festival. And we're just so pleased to be with you all tonight and to hear and to be in a place of activism that's already occurring and to be learning from you as partners. So thanks to everybody for coming out this evening. I think we have a nice crowd and filmmakers and folks here to be in discussion afterwards. I just want to share a little bit about who we are, if you haven't heard of One Earth Film Festival before, and let you know that we are a festival that uses film as a catalyst, but this is an action festival. And we really try to use these films as a catalyst for conversation, for awareness raising, and ultimately for acting on behalf of our one and only planet. I will say that this festival is just coming out of the gate tonight. So thank you for being our very, very first screening. So 2018 is our 7th year for our festival, and we're kicking it off right here at CCSJ. We do have a festival going on through March 11th, and so you will be able to see online all kinds of events. We will have 53 screenings and 2 special events between now and March 11th in 47 venues all throughout Chicagoland and sort of the region, this area. So please join us for some of those. I will also just kind of mention that we have to choose a theme for this year, and our theme is, where's Bob? Bob is wearing our blue t-shirt, and our theme for this year, after seeing all the activism and really an uptick in our volunteers and our partners and really an engagement and a spirit of the kind of activism that Dr. Chris was sharing about, that we chose for this year's theme, This is the Moment. because we really believe that it is the moment. And we really ask ourselves sort of what do we choose to do with this as a moment when we know what's happening to our environment, when we know that we have the power to change things. So I mean, seeing this film tonight together, having conversation together will help us really think about what could this be the moment for. So again, we thank you for having us and look forward to a great evening together. I'll just turn it over to my colleague, Vic Alden.
Good evening. So I'd like just to introduce a little bit to you before we get into the actual film. But as Anna said, this is a special. This is our first film, but also historically we've talked ourselves about being the Midwest premier environmental film festival. But this is the first time we've been out of Illinois to really be the Midwest environmental. So thank you for allowing us to come to Indiana and to have you be part of the Film Fest. And I would like to thank the sponsors that we have. The Film Fest, as Anna said, it takes a lot of volunteers, it takes a lot of sponsors, and so we have a PSA that we're going to show you now a little bit about the festival, but also a little bit about some of our partners. The big partner that we're introducing this year is called the Chicago Community Climate Agreement, and this is an agreement that on my shirt it says, "We are still in." This is in relationship to the U.S. Deciding not to be in the Paris Agreement, and we had a big meeting in Chicago to look at this question. The mayors from across the United States and from Latin America came to talk about how they were fulfilling their requirements to have a better planet by following some rigid things, some goals that would keep us on this planet. So I'm gonna show you this video, then we'll come back to introducing the film.
That we haven't seen here in Chicago before.
We know that nature itself will be impacted by climate change. We need nature to cool our cities, to reduce our flooding, to give us clean air and water, and to provide habitat for wildlife. We also need nature for our own physical and emotional and spiritual well-being.
We need to recognize that scientists have really valuable information to contribute, and at the same time, community members best to know the assets of their communities, the initiatives that are currently underway. And until we bring that information together, we can't successfully affect change.
We've got support of the Chicago Sustainability Leaders Network, which is connecting neighbor activity to municipal policy. And the fully integrated plan includes neighbors as well as the skyscrapers downtown. When you put all of that map of solutions together, you have really quite an impressive array.
We cannot do any of this work of changing the climate until we are all participating in all the things that we need to do as a collective in order to change this. No one community can do it without the other community, whereas our communities are as interconnected as nature itself. So it takes all of us to play a role in how we fix it.
The Chicago Agreement on Climate and Community is a call to action. It reflects the values and aspirations of a determined group of people, and it continues to evolve. Join us. Help us create a common vision of vibrant Chicago area communities, made stronger and more resilient through climate action. In developing this agreement, we seek to honor the progress and recognize the shortcomings of previous climate efforts, bring new voices into the discussion, and set the stage for further collaboration, conversation, and action in the Chicago region.
Recognizing our responsibility to our common home, the Chicago region, we affirm that. The well-being of our region is rooted in the integrity of our communities, the experiences of our people, the vitality of our economy, and the splendor of our natural environment and its biodiversity. These should be celebrated, cared for, and shared.
I affirm that climate change is a real and present danger. It threatens the natural and cultural fabric of our communities and undermines equitable access to clean water, breathable air, safe neighborhoods, green space, and economic opportunity.
I affirm that human activities are the primary cause of recent climate change.
I affirm that low-income communities and communities of color disproportionately bear the threats and burdens of a changing climate.
I affirm that it is our collective responsibility to slow and reverse climate change, safeguard our communities from its impacts, and improve our ability to respond to emerging risks.
I affirm that everyone has a vital role to play in contributing to climate solutions.
I affirm that climate solutions must anticipate and respond to global and local needs, taking inclusive and participatory approaches that respect diverse community priorities, identities, and values.
Joining together in care for our communities and the planet, I commit to
Taking up the Paris Agreement's goal of holding the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees, starting with action in the Chicago region.
I commit to strengthening our collective ability to manage the emergencies, shocks, and long-term stresses that Chicago area communities face now and in the future.
I commit to learn from the leadership of low-income communities and communities of color and to support their efforts to attain the benefits of climate action.
I commit to incorporating natural and technological solutions to a shifting climate, bolstering our region's ability to thrive.
I commit to holding elected officials, institutions, communities, and ourselves accountable for immediate and effective action to mitigate climate change and increase community resilience.
I commit to a common language, priorities, and goals that will enable collaboration to address climate change across diverse geographic, cultural, social, and economic boundaries.
Putting these values into immediate action, we each resolve to
identify and adopt specific evidence-based efforts to reduce my personal contributions to greenhouse gas emissions and to address the effects of global climate change.
I resolve to join or support a local climate effort that I'm not currently involved with or deepen my involvement in an effort that is currently underway.
I resolve to advocate for climate programs and policies that provide access to resources and opportunities for rewarding work.
I resolve to invest or participate in sustainability and resilience building efforts in low-income communities and communities of color.
I resolve to raise my voice to the media, politics, purchasing power, and other means to express and defend environmental and community values.
I resolve to practice and encourage stewardship of the natural world, which connects and supports our communities.
I resolve to engage family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues in working toward livable, healthy, safe, resilient communities for ourselves and for future generations.
The Chicago Agreement is our agreement. We're the ones who must bring it to life. It's time to walk the talk and start living it, making these words reality. We invite you to take these values and commitments, shape them and make them your own, and encourage others to do the same. We are the ones who must spark our communities to take action, and the time to start is now.
All right, so just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you'd silence your phones, but if active on social media, though, please check in now through your Foursquare or Facebook app to let people know where you are and that One Earth Film Fest is happening. Also, we invite you to live tweet. I'm not sure what live tweet is. Live tweet and post during the event, but please do not disturb your neighbors, particularly me. And please use our official hashtag. It's One Earth Square OEF 218 tag. This is the moment. Thank you for those who have made a financial contribution. Also, please consider donating on the way out if you hadn't had a chance at this time. So after the movie, we will have a conversation, and then after the conversation, we're going to have a panel discussion. And probably as important as the movie. And our facilitator and panel moderator is Dr. Terry Bergdahl. Terry Bergdahl is a professional facilitator with extensive international experience in community development, organizational change, project design, monitoring, evaluation. He lives in Chicago and is the former chief executive officer of the Institute of Cultural Affairs in the United States. Terry earned his PhD at the University of Wales with research on participatory evaluation. He is a founding member of the International Association of Facilitators. For several years, Terry worked to incorporate an asset-based community development approach in international development programs. He is presently on the board of ABCD at DePaul University. Terry?
Well, thank you, Dick. Many of us go to many movies. We don't always have a chance to pause and reflect upon what we saw or to talk about it and talk about the implications that it has to do for our future. Well, tonight, after viewing this film, we want to spend a few minutes doing that, talking among ourselves, and then we have an opportunity to have a panel talk a little bit about the production of this movie and its implications. Is Michael Fuente here tonight? There's Michael. Michael is the Northwest Indiana reporter for WBEZ. He'll be on our panel. We have Pat Wineski, the film producer and director. She'll be a part of this. Where's Pat? She's also back there. All right. Tom Desch will also join us. He's a writer-editor of the movie that we saw. And then we have Kenneth Scone, who is a professor emeritus of science education at Indiana University and author of the book, Shifting Sands. Now, this movie that we're going to see, Shifting Sands, tells the story of one region. In fact, this region, where we are now, where rare plants grow and in the shadow of smokestacks, where things got sparked and created a national park. And this is a film of an amazing changes that transform the environment and improve the quality of life for all of us. And with this, let's turn off the lights. Let's look at the movie Shifting Sands. Just answer three questions. One is, what's a scene or a quote or a comment that was made that really stands out for you? Secondly, I'd like for you to talk about, well, what would you say was the key message of this movie? And then finally, I'd like for you to talk among yourselves and just say, well, what's an implication for action? And what's this mean for you on what you might do? So why don't you pair up or create little groups of three and just try to answer those three questions. And we'll quickly just let you reflect a little bit and get some feedback, and then we'll move into our panel. A quote or a comment, what's the key message, what's an implication for action that this has for you?
Take my kids to slice. Yeah, that was That how connected was today and response to this is my voice actually is all my gosh, voice counts.
Now, let me remind you, if you haven't gotten to that last question, the third question, why don't you go ahead and spend a minute or two talking about that? And that's, what did this movie inspire you to think about in terms of action or what you might do? Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get some reflections from that. All right, thank you very much. Let's try to pull ourselves together, and I'd be very interested to hear some of the things that came out of the conversations in your small groups. So if you don't mind, let's go ahead and reconvene. Let me just ask, in your small group, and we have a microphone there, and Dick may pass it around to you, but what were some key quotes or scenes or things that were said in this movie that really stood out for you? Anybody? What were some of those things?
The picture of the person who stuck their hair in the movie and the one who stuck their hair in. Honestly, what stuck out to me in the end was the kind of rose-colored glasses portrayal of the industry. Here's a couple statistics from the
Go ahead and just give us a quick
No. Four of the top 20 super polluters in the U.S. are in Indiana. One of them is NIPSCO. I was shocked to see NIPSCO listed here as some kind of model of industrial responsibility. Top greenhouse gas emitters in Indiana. ArcelorMittal, U.S. Steel, and Middle Steel. Fourth, fifth, and sixth worst greenhouse emitters in Indiana. And to put that in context, Indiana is number 1 in toxic air emissions in the United States. That doesn't even touch on the pollution of our water and our soil in Lake County. So I was shocked to see, frankly, the steel industry and NIPSCO painted in this light.
All right, thank you very much. What were another quote or comment or picture that you saw that really stood out for you in the film?
My name is Jesse. One of the scenes that really stood out to me was when the individual brought a sample of the water to the shareholders meeting and returned it to the speaker or whatever. It showed a lot of courage. Inland Steel? Inland Steel. Okay. It showed a lot of courage that the individual shows them. It showed that he didn't care for the individual's position in society or his wealth or any of the perceived benefits of his position. He said, yo, your company did this, and this is just a sample. So I thought that was real interesting.
Somebody else, a picture, comment, a quote that stood out for you. Any others?
I just think the strength and the wisdom of the women.
Love the women.
That weren't gonna let anything stop them. They knew what was right, they were women of integrity and great wisdom.
All right.
They weren't afraid to
Excuse me, okay. Any others? Well, how about in your little small group discussions, how did you talk about what you felt was the major message of this film? What were some of the major messages that you heard? I
think it was a good portrayal. And what can happen in the future if we continue with progress.
I
I think also the fact that there is the possibility of change.
All righty.
Collaboration and compromise for the betterment of the future.
In Title II, it's a path to sustainability. We're not saying, I don't think the movie said, we're there, but it kind of showed the path and some of the big players in our area that are contributing to that, and then what do we do now?
All right. Other things that came up in your discussion about, you would say, this was the message, overriding message that you heard coming out of this film. Well, how about that last question? Oh, there you go.
There you go. Just, educating future generations on the things that need to be done to better sustain our ecosystems.
The final question that you talked about was, what did this movie inspire you to consider as a course of action, or things that you might do? What kind of ideas did you have about future action you might undertake as a result of this film?
I'd like to say something about the movie, and I know that the producers are here. I think it's a very nice movie, but the juxtaposition of what happens in Porter County to somehow say that that's applied to Lake County, and Northern Lake County in particular, I think it's a nice attempt, but it fails and falls very short. Northern Lake County, look out your window here, folks. We don't see any of this stuff that we should be enthusiastic about. I can show you failure after failure after failure of environmental problems that haven't been addressed. I can show you that environmental organizations, I shouldn't say organizations, let's say the state of Indiana, for example, has failed us over and over, and not ancient history, but within the last few months, whether it's the lead smelter they want to actually put in across the way here, or proposals to wipe out our wetlands or cut down our trees, all done with our money. So my message to all of you would be, it's great, it's a very nice movie, but we're not there yet. Maybe Porter County's there, but not North Lake County, and I might hopefully inspire all of you to fight. Work with guys like Mike, who puts his heart and soul into it, because none of what you see that's happened in Porter County, none of this preservation, none of this wonderful stuff happens here. We don't get that. We are not the recipient of that. So I might encourage all of you to keep fighting.
All righty, somebody else, where did you?
I'll make a statement on that. I'm going to be on the panel real quick. I got to say, I kind of agree with you, but then I don't, because you do see a lot of work on the shoreline of Whiting. You got to go to East Chicago, where I grew up, on the lakefront, where they're doing a lot of cleanup work by the casino, in between two large steel mills by the beachfront. I mean, you've got a lot of people who grew up there who, you've got to, like you said, you got to go to Porter County to go to the beach when it's right there in front of your eyes. So they're doing a lot of work in East Chicago, in Gary, to reclaim those areas where people couldn't go swimming for a long time. So, no, it hasn't gotten as far as Porter County, but Porter County hasn't suffered the way Northern Lake County has. And people are taking it back, and they're fighting, and it's still a long way to go. But they're doing it, and there's pockets of improvement and hope.
But are you equating recreation with the environment? I mean, Whiting picked up its lakefront, but it fixed it up by installing a water park. Just to give you an idea of why I don't want to be Debbie Downer, what can I be, Donald Downer. Yesterday, the Indiana Supreme Court ruled on the public trust doctrine, which says that all lakes in Indiana are preserved on behalf of the state of Indiana. So you don't fill them in, you don't abuse them, they're preserved for all of us. 2 lakes are excluded from the entire state of Indiana, George Lake and Wolf Lake, right out your window. So yesterday is a wonderful win for the rest of the state of Indiana, except for us. So I'm sorry I interrupt, but it's just those are wonderful things. They have a slide, that's great, but that's not preserving the environment.
What were you inspired to do and to consider doing as a result of watching this film?
My biggest thing is, after talking with the group, it's more so like our generation, we don't know, and we were unaware, and we go to the beach every summer and spend the summer there. But I think the biggest thing is being able to educate people going to the beach, maybe putting up signs there, maybe pictures or information, just so they can see that if you continue to do what we are doing this beach, you might not be able to come here next summer or the previous summer. But I think it's just getting to the places where you are like I said, going to the beach, us kids, like all of us, that's our generation, that's what we do in the summer. So even just putting that information there where it's present so we can see it.
All right, anybody else?
Hi, Marcus Sella. I'm a professor here at Calumet College. And the film discusses briefly the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 and sort of, gives the impression that the law, helped start pushing things in the right direction and encourage public involvement. But these laws need public participation and accountability to work. They're kind of toothless. They're civil laws. They're not criminal. So to enforce them and to ensure that these industries are held accountable, as citizens, we have to be very vigilant, monitoring when these NEPA reviews are happening, being involved in them, ensuring the proper information is distributed to the public. So just while the laws are important that they're in place, we have to know that these reviews are happening, and we have to participate in them to hold the industry accountable.
There's no substitution for participation. Well, I'd like to go ahead and shift a minute to our panel and give an opportunity for each one of them to say just a few words, and then we'll have a chance for some questions and answers afterwards, and then we'll bring our conversation to an end before it gets too late. So let me call forth our panel. I introduced him to you before, but Michael Pointes from WBEZ, if you'd come up. Tom Desch, who was a writer and editor of the film. Pat Winevsky, if she would come, the film producer and director, and then Kenneth Schoonf, who wrote the book that informed and really was the basis of this film. And maybe if we could just go in that order, would that be all right? Michael, if you would just say a word or two of reflection, and again, we're not looking for big speeches here, but just some reflections and comments that have things in perspective.
Well, I won't take too long. I'm really used to doing 45-second spots on the air. So, I'll say this: I grew up in Northwest Indiana. My dad worked for 42 years at Inland Steel, and I graduated from this college here. I'm not going to say when, but I did, and I teach here now. I teach journalism here. I love this school tremendously, and of course, it's always great to see the insignia of my great radio station behind me because. WBEZ is known as a Chicago radio station, but we've been here now with the Northwest Indiana Bureau for 12 years. And that's a pretty strong commitment when you consider the downsizing of local media and reporting. So we don't do wall-to-wall coverage of Chicago or Northwest Indiana, but we get our punches in, and we try to do good work. That being said, this movie needed to be made. It needs to tell about the history because you've got to get people to love something to preserve it. The Northwest Indiana, and I feel it all the time. When I introduce myself from WBEZ, I say I'm the Rhode Island bureau chief over here because a lot of times Indiana might as well be Rhode Island because people just, I don't know what it is, there's a wall that's there that doesn't allow that. As soon as they hear the word Indiana, they either fall asleep. It might be like that thing in Turkey that they hear it and they fall asleep or not paying attention. And people have always said, well, why are you the Northwest Indiana reporter? What does Indiana have anything to do with Chicago? Like, well, we just got a huge refinery in Northwest Indiana that affects Lake Michigan water. But you're right, there's nothing else. Oh, there's steel mills, there's pollution, but there's also tourism and great things that people come over here. There's agriculture, there's rich diversity here of people and plants. So I tell you what, the one thing, I know maybe at the end of the documentary does paint a rosy picture because there has to be hope on there. It's sort of like a environmental Star Wars movie. There's gotta be hope, and I like to say a lot of the people in that documentary I've interviewed in the past. But there needs to be a new generation of people who are gonna push environmental and protection of this area into the future.
Thank you very much. Pat?
Hi. Well, I'm a steel worker. My Originally, I grew up, same thing, my dad was 43 years at U.S. Steel. I'm a third generation steel worker. I worked at the Republic Steel on the southeast side of Chicago for 10 years. I was a union rep for Local 1033. And I came upon a little woman who was in her 80s by the name of Lee Botts, who was an environmentalist. And so together, you know, we started talking about this film. It was already some of it was being shot by Ronna Siegel, who's not here tonight. Tom Desch came on with me as a producer. But one of the things, you know, in growing up in this area and seeing the snow full of red iron ore in the wintertime when I went out to play in it, you know, I've seen it all. You know, my cousin and I would talk about swimming at Cow Park and coming out with like the sheen, you know. It was an oil sheen. And now we knew where it came from. But there have been things. I agree with Michael, you have to offer hope. If there's no hope, you might as well just say, forget it. What can we do? I researched this Grand Calumet River with Lee Botts. I talked to a scientist who told me that this was the most polluted river ever documented, ever. In terms of toxic, the amount of toxicities in the sediments, okay? I watched the cleanup. I filmed the cleanup. I talked to Doreen Carey, who just left, who was on the Grand Calumet Task Force, who said there was never anything living in the river in the 1960s. I talked to scientists who had specimens who swam up that river and their fins burned off. So I got that ugliness, and I hope you got some of that from the film, but I also went out with people today who are electrofishing, and that means they put an electronic thing in the water and they see what kind of fish come to the top. Now, before, there was nothing there. Now, there were bass coming in that river. This was in Gary. There were sunfish, okay? Now, those types of fish are high-quality fish. They can't live. They're not bottom feeders like carp that can live in toxic things. Now, not to say that these fish, it's going to take generations to get this out. You're talking 100 years of industrial pollution that with unbridled. It's not going to change overnight. It's not a rosy picture. But I'm glad that some people are trying and to take on that effort to clean up a river with 100 years pollution. Amen. I say yes. Hey, thank God somebody tried that. And I'm looking at this younger generation that I hope you can do exactly what Paul Labus and there's Chris Krause is here from the, Chris, stand up, Shirley Hines Land Trust. These guys are angels. You know what I discovered? There's hundreds of people every day out there fighting to keep your air, your water, and restore your land. He's one of the restorers. He's bringing back and preserving that biodiversity, because biodiversity is the insurance policy for the planet. If we don't have that, we don't have a next cure for cancer. And this region is one of the most biodiverse in the nation, and we've got to protect it. And it's still there, even in the midst of all these steel mills. And in fact, some of it's still there because of the steel mills, because they bought up all that property and they had these huge tracts of land that allowed some of this, biodiversity to still exist there. So, yeah, are there problems? Sure there are. Am I saying that the industries are good? No. But you know what? My family was supported by them all these years. They fed me. I drove a car here today. I don't know about all of you, but I think you did. And in the law of supply and demand, those cars are made of steel and they run on gasoline. So until we come up with new ways, we all have to be part of this. We all have to fight the polluters. We all have to take ownership in ways that we can be more sustainable in our own lives. So that's
Thank you very
my
much,
two cents.
Tom, where to as a writer-producer?
Sure. And one thing just to piggyback on Pat is, I think one thing is that we're all the polluters. And one thing that, we didn't really examine too closely in this film, but is that it was the industrial advances of the 20th century that led to this pollution. And I think our great challenge for the 21st century is how do we find some sort of equilibrium where we don't, none of us want to get rid of our shiny fancy cars or our lovely homes, but we can't do what we did in the 19th and 20th century. And and certainly we're not there yet. I guess a little bit about myself. I was kind of the carpetbagger on this project. I'm from Illinois. Please don't hold that against me. We have our own issues. But it was really a treat. I think it was nice to come here with outsiders' eyes to see the special things about this region that I think, you know, a lot of folks who maybe live here, grow up here, don't see. I had no idea what dune and swale was until meeting this gentleman to my right. And then I was amazed to learn that, you know, some of the best remnants of this rare landscape were, you know, right here. And, you know, in the history that came out of here, that the Nature Conservancy has its roots with the studies that occurred here. I mean, it's really kind of earth-shattering, everything that came out of this region. Partly because it was so heavily impacted, of course, and that it was so heavily impacted in such a rare, valuable landscape.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, Ken?
I grew up in the city of Gary, went to Gary High School. We had a lagoon in front of the school, and that's where I learned to ice skate. That's where I learned that you don't ice skate when the ice isn't thick enough. Like Wolf Lake, it wasn't very deep. I went to that school, because it was the Gary system, for 12.5 years with that lagoon in front of the school, and nobody ever told me why it was there. I was living in the middle of the dune and swale landscape, but one that had been completely flattened except for a 2-block long lagoon. There was a reflecting pond in front of the school. That was the only remnant on the near west side from the swales that were common through the whole area before the Gary Land Company smoothed everything off to create a residential neighborhood. I worked in the Gary steel mills to put myself through college. I wanted to be a history teacher because I loved history. I took a course from Dr. Reshkin, who you just saw. And by the end of that semester, fortunately, my freshman year, I changed my major from history to geology and became a science teacher. And so it's terrific to see to see this area from a different light. To realize that the history of this area is so much related to the geology. Why is this area got some of the best, in fact, Dale Enquist says in the video, the best acre-for-acre biodiversity on the planet in northwest Indiana, and yet it's the perfect place for heavy industry. The biodiversity has a geological background. We have the farthest southern range of Arctic plants, like the jack pine and the tamarack tree, and the farthest northern range for desert plants like the prickly pear cactus. We have forest plants that are common in every state between us and the East Coast, and we have prairie plants that are common in every state from here to the Rocky Mountains. And they're all found in northwest Indiana. This area has none of the natural resources except water that are good for making steel. But we're right in the middle of it, and Lake Michigan provided that transport for limestone and iron ore to come from the north, and the railroads brought up the iron ore from the south and created, right here in the middle of the diversity, one of the largest steel producing locations on Earth, resulting in the most polluted river on Earth. A river that flowed 3 blocks from my house, where I grew up, and I never was tempted to go wading in that river. We, as teenagers and preteens, we hung out next to the water, but you know, we'd never drown in it because we would never even get our toes wet. Although I don't think the toe would have rotted off, it nevertheless was so uninviting. I understand my dad went skinny dipping with friends when he was a kid. I was never, good grief, never tempted to do that. There has been a wonderful collection, and the book that we have and the video, copies of which are available before you leave, tell that story as a celebration of where we have been and what we have done, but nowhere does it say that the work is ended.
Okay, thank you very much. Dick, you've got the microphone. Let's take a chance of a few questions that you might like to ask the panel, and we'll engage in a little bit of a conversation here before we call it an evening. So does anybody have a question you'd like to address to one or all of the panelists?
Everyone hear me okay? I think that Ken is the king of doing and swale, so it's good to have him in the room. And his book is worth a look. My question is, we got a lot of people who are interested in moving forward. What's the call to action? What do we do?
This is a moment for it.
Who would like to address that question?
Well, I don't know what the call to action is. I will say this though, there are a lot of movements in Northwest Indiana to protect the environment. It is a different generation, and you're seeing that kind of filtering down from the southeast side of Chicago, where folks there are I don't want it to be sort of an industry versus the people type thing, because again, both our heritage is from steel. My parents, my dad worked in the steel mill, and I'm proud of the steel mills. This is part of the identity of Northwest Indiana and the southeast side of Chicago. I'm a man of steel, but also you have to be proud of the dunes and protecting that, because it's a resource that once it's gone away, it's going to go away forever. But you're seeing where on the southeast side of Chicago, people have been vocal, rising up, and talking about the pollution that they don't want there anymore. Everything from the pet coke, I cover that a lot. And they're ready to sort of say goodbye to some of that heavy, dirty industry that, yes, provides probably a good wage for some people, not as many people as in the past, but they're slowly saying, look, there's a better way here. We want a life, we want a healthy life for our families, for our children, and that's slowly filtering down to Northwest Indiana, where you're seeing people from the Southeast Side Environmental Task Force, environmental groups like that, helping folks in Northwest Indiana. I mean, tonight there's a huge EPA meeting in East Chicago to talk about the USS Lead Superfund site that they're going to pour $80 million to help clean up. That's legacy pollution that, the jobs, provided a lot of good jobs and everything, but you're living with the effects. We just saw the issue with the West Calumet housing project. You see issues in Gary. Tremendous environmental challenges in Gary, Hammond, East Chicago, Whiting. But you are seeing people rising up and just not taking it. The problem is, we live in an area that is, you have our neighbors to Chicago who really, they come down here, they may like it and enjoy it, but they don't live here. They don't live here if you don't take ownership of something, you're not going to care for it as much. Then Indianapolis is 2 to 3 hours away. They don't care about Northwest Indiana in the way that they should. They don't see it, they don't live it, they don't breathe it. They may see pictures of it. And let's face it, people think nothing good comes out of Northwest Indiana. That's been the mentality. Where we're seeing, thanks to this movie, that a lot of great stuff have come out of this area. A lot of things with the environmental movement. So where's the call to action? Well, it's in East Chicago, it's in Hammond, it's in Gary. It's fighting a lot of legacy pollution and getting out there and, going with the Calumet Lives Matter folks. They're making noise. And people all the way from Indianapolis to Chicago to New York, D.C., and Luxembourg, where the owners of Inland Steel, ArcelorMittal, where they live, they're hearing it. And that's the call to action.
Okay. Anybody else like to make a comment on call to action, or should we take another question?
I agree with Michael. There's calls to action everywhere, no matter what you do. Whether you want to be an activist and speak loudly on the subject, or if you want to be help volunteer for a group like Shirley Hines or the Nature Conservancy and work on restoration efforts. They always need helping hands. So whatever your skills and your talents are, I think go for it. Young people, get an education in sustainability, because that is the future. You know, how are we going to blend, how are we going to have an economic development so we have jobs, but yet still have a clean environment and social justice? Where those three can meet, that's the future. Here we had huge economic development, but no regard for the environment and no social justice in terms of where they dumped it. And so the future is changing those things. And that's all we're trying to say in the movie. We're not trying to paint everything that's done. It's nowhere near done. And Leah said that right at the end of the film. She said they've come a long way. That 90% of the pollution in your air and water has been reduced. A lot of that came about because of environmental laws in the 70s. Where before that, you know, like Bob Topol from the EPA said in the film, U.S. Steel was dumping and everything they were doing was perfectly legal because there were no laws. So get involved.
And that means to not stay home on election day.
Exactly.
It's embarrassing to see how few people vote, and local elections are important as well as state and national elections, because locally you elect the people who are going to decide how the land in your city or town or county is going to be used. And you need to find out what the views are of people running for office. You need to be aware of what's happening. You need to live a sustainable life. You need to think about composting and not accepting plastic straws at McDonald's and not taking plastic forks and knives just because you asked for a take-home salad. You need to recycle. You need to put waste where it's supposed to be and try to get the least amount of waste that you create. You need to put water down a drain and nothing else. So there are a lot of things we can do individually and a lot of things we can do collectively.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question you'd like to ask? There's one, a couple over here.
So I'm part of a class here at Calumet College St. Joseph, and we have been tasked with coming up with a project that combines community and a cause. And we've been inspired by this video. Would there be any projects that we could undertake that relate to this topic you would recommend?
Oh gosh. There is a number of them. Is it a particular class that you're in, or what?
The class is Global Religions and Dialogue, but we're just a cause, and then we can form it to spirituality and all that as we see fit.
Yeah, well, definitely the social justice aspect, you know, I think, because you have to look at why are poor neighborhoods so subjected to these things like lead and other things? Why are they building homes on top of 100 years of lead pollution? I think those are topics you can take into account. If you want to volunteer and get your hands dirty, see Chris Kraus in the back of the room with Shirley Hines Land Trust, because I'm sure Chris, you have a lot of projects they could undertake, or would you like to speak to some of them?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that there's several local environmental groups like Shirley Hines Land Trust, Save the Dunes, Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, and DNR. They have volunteer work days and opportunities, and we do some stuff with Indiana University and other local universities like internship programs. So we would be happy to talk to your professor, and we could do a special project. Yeah, yep, yeah, I do.
Very good. The networking begins. Dick, let's do one other question. And then I'll turn it over to you to close up.
Well, this is a question kind of like, I think I would like to see in the future more brown folks and black folks speaking.
Area, I know the film wasn't on that, but to see their faces and voices, because I know a lot of them have been scattered, they're gone, and their voices and stories have never been captured. And I think I myself in College Branch, and I take inspiration from the Catholic worker, founder Dorothy Day. She didn't, I think, set out to change the world, but I think just set out to be a good neighbor. And that calls for proximity. If you want to be a good neighbor, you have to be with people. You have to be with them, you have to walk with them, you have to suffer with them sometimes too. You have to put yourself at risk. I think that's sometimes what we lack. I think we want to do things at a distance and not necessarily walk with people and talk with people and listen to people.
Any comment back to that, or show?
No, it's very good.
Dick, let me encourage the networking to continue, but let's go ahead and bring ourselves to a formal end.
Well, I want to introduce two ladies who are going to talk to us for a little bit, right? And they have a special project they'd like to talk to you about.
Well, all right. Kind of to go off of what Chris said in terms of volunteering and opportunities to get involved. My name is Terry Valenzuela. I work with Audubon Great Lakes, and we have tons of volunteer opportunities. In fact, we actually have a student project that Stephanie's going to talk to you about. But we brought a ton of informational packets that you can do right in your home, plants for birds. We also brought native seeds for everyone to take home. So there's such simple ways that you can get involved. You can do it right in your backyard, as Ken was speaking about. And we also have internship opportunities, so it doesn't just end after school or after you have a course that you have to get involved with the communities. You can also get involved as a career, and they are paid internships. But here is Stephanie to talk to you more about the community projects.
I'm Stephanie Bilke, and I'm also with Audubon Great Lakes, and I'm leading marsh bird monitoring all over the Calumet region, and Audubon is leading marsh bird monitoring the last 3 years, and we're using that data to inform the land managers about how their restoration projects are affecting marsh bird populations. And we are seeing, like what was talked about earlier about you're seeing fish that weren't there before. We're also seeing marsh birds that weren't there just 10 years ago. But to go along with that, we have been trying to also not just look at birds, but also look at water quality and how that is affecting birds, and also how restoration projects impact water quality in the Calumet area. So we're hoping to start water monitoring in the spring and get data on pH level and nutrients in the water. And so we're looking for students that can help with that project, and we have a sign-up sheet that we'll have in the back of the room later. So yeah, feel free to talk to us.
Okay. Thank you very much. So let's thank Terry and the panel and Calumet College for hosting us. And as you leave, I would like to encourage you to consider buying a T-shirt of "This is the Moment," because this is the moment. And also, we have the Chicago Climate Agreement that you could sign to be part of that agreement. And remember, you have on your seat these film sheets that tell you where films are going to be on for the next couple. Well, March 2 through the 11th. So there's a lot of other great movies. And this is the first movie we've ever done in Indiana, and hopefully it's not the last film we ever do in Indiana, but hopefully it's a portent of the future. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Good.